So if you're like me, you have friends on the internet who like to share recipes and little videos of recipes and things like that. And a lot of times the recipes look easy and they're meant to be easy, but you can't get an idea of whether they really are because you don't see someone actually cooking them. I see these recipes and I want to know if they work. So I'm going to be trying one out for you today. And this is an Instant Pot meatloaf and mashed potatoes that says that in a short amount of time you can prepare both meatloaf and mashed potatoes in the same Instant Pot and have dinner ready by the time you're done. Okay, so to start out with, we've got some potatoes, about 3 potatoes. The recipe calls for yellow potatoes. I used red potatoes, and I quartered them like the recipe says, and I'm layering them in the bottom of the Instant Pot as flat as I can get them. Now I peeled them, but the recipe does not recommend you peel them. So once you've got the potatoes layered on the bottom of your Instant Pot, you're going to use the rack that came with your Instant Pot. You're going to put it on top of the potatoes to kind of make a bed that is flat that you're going to be able to cook your meatloaf on. And you're actually going to use aluminum foil to create kind of a tray around your meatloaf. I'm going to kind of measure out the... There we go. So I got that. I'm just going to push it down onto the top of this. Okay. So that's the bed for the meatloaf. So we also need some liquid, both to cook the potatoes and because the pressure cooker won't work unless there's any liquid in there. So we need 1 cup of chicken broth or chicken stock. I'm just going to use from a can because I don't have any stock prepared. All right, the potatoes are ready to go. Now we have to chop an onion for the meatloaf. Really, we're going to dice it to a small dice. All right, so I'm going to combine all the meatloaf ingredients. I've got a pound, let's see, actually 2 pounds, and I've got a mix of ground beef and ground pork here. It's like a meatball mix, but I'm going to use it for meatloaf here. So I'm varying the recipe a little bit. So take that into account when you're taking my advice here. To that I'm going to add a cup of breadcrumbs. Couple of eggs to firm this thing up. Two teaspoons of garlic powder that I'm obviously measuring really carefully. About a teaspoon of pepper. I like a little bit more pepper. And a teaspoon of salt. I'm going to use kosher salt, so I'm going to use a little bit more salt than that. Half a cup of honey barbecue sauce. I've actually got a sweet and smoky sauce that I really like here. About half a cup there for flavor. And now we're going to mix this up and form it into a meatloaf. Just going to use some gloves for that process. You just need to mix this together until everything's incorporated. No reason to overmix it. Well, here's one of the reasons I like to use gloves. I forgot one of the ingredients, parsley. So about 2 teaspoons of dried parsley. I go heavy on the parsley. just because it's not super flavorful when it's dried. My gloves not quite working out, so let's abandon that. My hands are clean, so. All right, this is just easier this way. Anyway, if you like pinch it, that's actually a good way to mix everything that's on the top and the sides. Okay, so what we're gonna do now that we've got it basically mixed is we're gonna form a loaf and place that right into the Instant Pot where we've made a nice cradle of foil for it. All right. I'm not going to get too fancy here. There's my loaf. Place it down into the foil. Just press it down a little bit to keep it from poking up too much. Now I'm going to wash my hands and then secure the lid. Set it for sealing. And then I'm going to cook it on manual pressure mode on high for about 20 to 25 minutes. Actually, I'm going to give this 25 minutes to make sure it's cooked. Now while that's cooking, I'm going to clean up a little bit and then I'm going to make the sauce. So the sauce is basically a glaze for the top of the meatloaf once it's done. And that's going to consist of brown sugar, ketchup, and mustard. 2 tablespoons of brown sugar. 2 tablespoons of mustard so that you can really taste it. And 1/3 cup of ketchup. Just a slightly sweet, ketchup-y, mustardy glaze. All right, that's mixed. That can wait for the meatloaf to be done. And basically that's what we're gonna do. Okay, once the timer has gone off on the Instant Pot, we wanna do a quick release. Careful for the steam. Okay, so we want the meatloaf to be an internal temperature of 155 degrees. Let's take a look at it. Well, it looks cooked, but clearly it needs to be browned. So let's check the temperature. Of course, there's not much we can do about it in the pressure cooker now that it's cooked, and that's one of the reasons I let it go for 25 minutes. Okay, the internal temperature is actually a little bit low right now. It's about 120 degrees, and that's no good. So I'm going to put it in the, so I'm going to carefully actually lift it out of the Instant Pot. So even at the higher amount of time, this thing did not reach the temperature that we had hoped. But we're going to finish it in the oven under the broiler. So hopefully that doesn't end up causing us a problem. So you can see how the rack makes it easier to lift this thing out. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the foil a little bit, and I'm going to put the glaze on here, and then I'm going to carefully transfer it to the oven. Off to the oven this goes, under the broiler. I'm thinking it's probably going to need at least 5 minutes, but we'll see. Now, because I know I'm going to need to leave it in there a little bit longer to get that temperature, that internal temperature up, I actually lowered the oven rack so that the meatloaf wasn't right underneath the broiler. So let's take a look at these mashed potatoes now. Potatoes are clearly cooked through and ready to mash. I've got some other ingredients to go with the potatoes here. Now, the recipe calls for butter and sour cream. My family's not a huge fan of sour cream, so what I decided was I would increase the butter slightly 4 tablespoons is what the recipe called for. I'm going to put 5 tablespoons in there. I'm going to judge the creaminess of the potatoes once I've mashed them a little bit, and I'm going to supplement with the remaining chicken stock. Also, I'm going to add a teaspoon or so of garlic powder and a couple of teaspoons of parsley flakes. The idea being, give it a little bit more flavor. So let's mash these. They seem plenty cooked, so the potatoes got cooked. Right now I'm going to mix some salt and pepper in here to test the flavor of this. It's actually pretty good as is. I'm going to put the top on this and keep the keep warm function on to both keep it warm but keep it from drying out. Okay, you can see by the timer on the Instant Pot that this took quite a bit longer than we expected. The count up timer keeps going once the thing's done cooking. So you can see we've got like 19 minutes on there since we took the meatloaf out of there. It might have taken me about 4 minutes to glaze the thing. So let's say it was about 15 minutes in the oven. The internal temperature is now about 160 degrees, so well into the safe area, so it probably needed maybe about 12 minutes in the oven total. So you can see, looking at the top of this thing, that it burned in a couple of places. Of course, this can be basically taken off because that's just the glaze. That wouldn't have happened if I had not had to keep it in there longer than expected. If I had just been browning it under the broiler, it never would have burned. So I attribute that to the recipe being off a little bit. What's my estimate about how long it would take to actually cook to internal temperature? I'm not actually sure. I would give it at least 5 more minutes in the Instant Pot. So my guess would be maybe 30 minutes instead of 25. Of course, it's important to know what this tastes like. So let me cut off a slice of the end of this. Oops. And I'm going to check them out together. It looks cooked on the inside, so that's good. The flavor is not bad. It's not super strong. I would add Worcestershire sauce. I like a real flavor punch on my meatloaf. However, that's not everybody's thing. Some people just like the old standard meatloaf, and this will definitely do. I'd be happy to eat this at the end of a day. So apart from a problem with the internal temperature of the meatloaf, which I think can be remedied by increasing the time, I think this is an okay recipe. It makes meatloaf and it makes mashed potatoes. But let me know what you think. Would you make this recipe? And if you did make this recipe, would you use the ingredients that the original recipe recommended for the meatloaf, or would you substitute your own 2-pound meatloaf recipe for this? Do you have a recipe that you really like for meatloaf? Have you seen a recipe online shared by someone on Facebook or maybe on Twitter that you weren't sure whether you wanted to make because it wasn't clear whether it would work or not? If you have, let us know about it and maybe we'll give it a try for you and tell you how it turned out. Thanks for watching, and remember what Bob and I always say: you can cook anything.